Every Stephen King movie adaptation explored. Stephen King, a highly decorated man of letters, cannot be just restricted to being an author, can he? He is an institution of horror, and his legacy of classic horror stories is unmatched. He has published 63 novels, which include 7 under the pen name Richard Bachman, and 5 nonfiction books. Be it a TV series or a movie, we all connected to King's stories. His ideas of horror are the foundation for the modern-day thriller, suspense, and horror ideas. There were some movies which crossed all barriers of appreciation, while some were just good enough for a one-time watch. Hold your horses, because in this video, we will be going through 36 best Stephen King adaptations in movies. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin! Number 1. CARRIE, 1976. The story is about a shy 16-year-old girl, CARRIE, who was raised under a repressive moral code by her dogmatic and religious fanatic mother, Margaret White. Being introverted, she was often bullied by her classmates. At the onset of her first menstrual cycle, she was humiliated, and her bullies made it worse by throwing tampons at her at school. On returning home, her ignorant mother locked her in a prayer closet, stating that her periods were an outcome of her sins. At school, Miss Collins, her gym teacher, looks into her situation and reprimands the ruffians with a week-long detention. Engrossed in vengeance, CARRIE's consistent bully Christine Hargensen, along with her boyfriend Billy Nolan, plots to pull off a prank on CARRIE by dropping pig's blood on her at prom night, which they had collected from a local farm. Meanwhile, Norma, Chris's best friend and also a prominent figure in school, rigs the prom queen selection to get her up on stage and sew up their malice. Back at home, CARRIE learns how she can use telekinesis the moment she shrugs off her shyness. On the day of the prom, Chris's malevolent plan comes to action, and they get CARRIE drenched in pig's blood, but accidentally kill Tommy with the empty bucket. CARRIE's piling trauma reaches its zenith, and she loses her self-control, bringing rampage on the partygoers and teachers at the prom, and not just stopping there. CARRIE, directed by Brian De Palma, is a movie adaptation of Stephen King's epistolary horror novel of the same name. The plot is based on every bully victim's make-believe vengeance. Moritz and Moore with their skills lift up the vibe of the transition for the movie. The movie was ranked 15 by Entertainment Weekly among its top 50 high school movies and is a must-watch for all high school goers.
Open it up! Dufresne, open this door!
Number 2. SHAWSHANK Redemption, 1994. The plot of the movie is set in the year 1947 in Portland, Maine, with Andy Dufresne being charged of a double murder of his wife and her lover. By the jury's decision, he was sentenced to 2 life sentences at Shawshank State Prison, where he meets Ellis Redding, an inmate serving a life sentence. Andy starts working at the prison laundry and is repeatedly assaulted by a group of prisoners led by Boggs. 2 years later, Andy helps the captain of the guards, Byron Hadley, from paying high taxes on his inheritance, and to return his favor, when the prison gang nearly kills Andy, he cripples Boggs and transfers him to another prison, thereby solving his troubles with the gang. Warden Samuel Norton meets Andy and reallocates him to the prison library to manage financial matters concerning prison staff, prisoners, and the warden himself. In 1963, Andy learns how Norton had been accepting bribes and exploiting prison labor costs for himself, and helps him launder his illegal gains under the name of Randall Stevens. Andy, from a new prison inmate, Tommy, learns how a prisoner at another prison had taken responsibility for the murder of his wife and her lover. Andy reported the case to Norton, but he repudiated, and later got Tommy murdered by Hadley, framing it as an unwanted outcome of Tommy's attempt to escape. Andy is eventually removed from his prison at the library and sent to solitary confinement for 2 months. Ellis, worried for his friend, waits helplessly for what is going to happen next. Directed by Frank Darabont, SHAWSHANK Redemption is a movie based on Stephen King's novel Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. The movie received multiple award nominations, including 7 Academy Award nominations. The movie, starring Tim Robbins as Andy and Morgan Freeman as Ellis, leaves a long-lasting feeling of poignancy, joy, and fear.
Sir? Thinner.
Number 3. Thinner, 1996. The movie unfolds the story of Billy Halleck, a corpulent upper-class lawyer living with his wife Heidi and their daughter Linda. Richie, the Hammer Ginelli, who is an underworld kingpin defended by Billy in court, is now commemorating his exoneration on a murder charge. Heidi, in her attempts to coax Billy to forget about his food lust, venerably relieves Billy with oral sex while he is driving, which leads to Billy's distraction and in turn results in an accidental runover of an aged gypsy woman named Suzanne Lemke, killing her in the process. Billy, who is friends with the judge and the police officer, escapes the trial with ease. Engrossed in retribution, Suzanne's father, Tadzu Lemke, imprecates Billy by saying thinner, which causes Billy to lose weight rapidly without any prior reason. Heidi, frightened by the emaciation that may be due to cancer, phones Dr. Mike Houston, with whom Billy suspects his wife might be having an affair. In his endeavor to lift the curse imposed on him, Billy finds and tries to reason with Tadzu, failing which he attacks the Romani camp with the help of Janelli. Tadzu finally makes Billy a strawberry pie, mixing his blood in it, and stating that Billy will be free if someone else eats the pie, giving them a quick death.
Somebody got to eat this pie, and soon. Everyone who eat pie die.
Based on Stephen King's 1984 novel of the same name, Thinner, directed by Tom Holland, is a vivid representation of society's class discrimination and ignorance towards gypsies and how escaping homicide is a cakewalk for the powerful class.
Oh shit!
Number 4. Stand By Me, 1986. The movie begins with writer Gordy LaChance reading a newspaper article about a man stabbed in a restaurant and recalling his childhood adventure with his best friend Chris Chambers and his friends Teddy Duchamp and Vern Tessio during Labor Day weekend in September 1959. Them, in his attempt to find the money he had buried under his parents' porch, overheard his older brother Denny talking to his friend Charlie about searching for the body of the disappeared boy Ray Brower outside of town. Vern informs the other three and they decide to find the missing body and become native heroes. Chris steals his father's pistol and he, along with Gordy, runs into a local thug, Ace Merrill, and Chris's older brother, Eyeball Chambers.
There. I feel a whole lot better about this. How about you?
They get threatened by the notorious duo and Ace steals Gordy's Yankees cap, which was a present from Denny. The four boys begin their journey of adventure, where they experience several incidents that get them to know each other and stand for what is right. They cross a railroad bridge getting nearly killed by an advancing train, swim across a pond filled with leeches, and much more.
Neck. It's leech. Leeches! Oh my god!
Directed by Rob Reiner and screenplay by Bruce A. Evans and Reynold Gideon, Stand By Me is a movie adaptation of Stephen King's short novel, The Body. The title is derived from American soul and R&B singer Benjamin Earl King's song Stand By Me. The movie with its talented cast has beautifully woven human emotions of pathos and joy and is a must-watch for everybody.
No, the misery! My misery! No!
Number 5. Misery, 1990. The story revolves around an acclaimed novelist, Paul Sheldon, the author of an eminent series of Victorian romance novels that spotlights a character called Misery Chastain. Hoping to step into his post-Misery era, Paul engages in writing a manuscript for his new novel. As the story proceeds, a blizzard knocks Paul's car off the road when he is returning home. Paul discovers himself bedridden with broken legs and a dislocated shoulder, after regaining consciousness from a coma. He was under the care of Annie Wilkes, who found him unconscious and saved him. Annie, who claims to be his #1 fan, cannot stop talking about him and his novels. Acknowledging everything, Paul humbly hands Annie his new manuscript to read, studying which she flares at him for the vulgarity of the content. Sequentially, she reads the upcoming Misery novel, which surprises and enrages her when she comes across the death of the character Misery. Paul is astonished to see how Annie transforms into this unanticipated, controlling version, threatening to kill Paul if he does not comply to write a new novel titled Misery's Return.
I don't want her, bitch! I want her! And you murdered her!
Out of fear and wit, Paul agrees. The movie thus advances with Paul's repeated attempts in trying to kill Annie and escaping her crib, where she has imprisoned him. Based on Stephen King's 1987 novel of the same name, Misery is a psychological thriller film directed by Rob Reiner. The movie successfully elaborates the state of possessiveness and the mental duel of two characters who constantly try to outmaneuver each other. The wise selection of cast for each role is highly appreciable.
Holy God. Oh, I...
Number 6. The Mist, 2007. The movie sets its frame in Bridgeton, Maine, where David Drayton, an artist, takes refuge in the basement of his lake house with his wife Stephanie and their 8-year-old son Billy amidst a grave thunderstorm. Post the calamity, a thick mist is seen approaching over the lake the following morning. In the need to acquire supplies, David, Billy, and Brent Norton, their neighbor, rush to the supermarket, where Dan Miller, a frantic local, speeds into the store, alerting everyone of a prowling danger in the mist. With the sound of a siren, everyone is alerted about the mist surrounding the supermarket. The managers Ollie Weeks and Bud Brown shut off the supermarket. Norm, the bagger who goes outside intending to fix the store's emergency generator, is grasped by a tentacled creature, hauling him into the mist. Alerted by the lurking threat, David and Ollie lead the others to rampart the windows. On the contrary, some of the people start to panic and revolt for various personal and religious reasons, leaving the store and resulting in their deaths by unnaturally vicious creatures from another dimension. David and the remaining people continue to strive for their survival as the movie unfolds further. The Mist, directed by Frank Darabont, is a science fiction horror film based on the 1980 short novel The Mist by Stephen King. With the elements of horror and the eeriness of the unknown, if not a must-watch, it is definitely a good source of entertainment for sci-fi lovers.
Amy is my daughter's name.
Your daughter's screaming. The house is burning.
Number 7. The Dead Zone, 1983. The story is about a high school teacher, Johnny Smith, residing in Castle Rock, Maine, who meets with a car accident and puts up with a 5-year-long coma under the care of neurologist Dr. Sam Wyzak. On getting back his senses, he realizes that with a physical touch, he can learn aspects and anticipate the future for anyone. He touches the nurse and warns her about her daughter being trapped in a house fire, and also tells Dr. Wyzak about his mother, who they thought had died in World War II by touching him. With the news of Johnny's new abilities spreading, Sheriff George Bannerman asks him for his help in a series of murder cases. But Johnny, on learning that his love Sarah is now a wife and a mother, denies help and seeks a life of solitude. Sarah pays a visit to Johnny with her infant boy and tells him how she cannot continue the relationship any further. Johnny thinks twice about the sheriff's proposal and helps him with the murder cases. Dr. Wyzak warns Johnny that with his powers growing, his body gets weakened, and he chooses a life of low profile where he would tutor kids at home. A wealthy man named Roger Stewart exhorts Johnny to tutor his son, Chris. Johnny and Chris share a friendly bond, and with his ability to foresee danger, Johnny saves Chris from drowning in a local pond during an ice hockey game. Knowing that he can change the future, he decides to take down the cold-blooded rabble-rouser Greg Stilson, who was the third-party candidate for the United States Senate.
Johnny!
The Dead Zone is an American thriller film based on Stephen King's novel of the same name from 1979. The title refers to the parts of the brain that get damaged with his physical awakening. The movie revolves around a remarkable supernatural setting that maintains the eeriness and thrill throughout its run. Number 8. Secret Window, 2004. The movie revolves around mystery writer Mort Rainey, who after catching his wife cheating on him with their friend Ted, trudges back to his cabin at Tashmore Lake in upstate New York. 6 months later, Mort, trying to overcome his depression and writer's block, is visited by a man named John Shooter at his cabin, who accuses Mort of plagiarism. His short story, Secret Widow, happens to be an exact copy of Shooter's own story, Sewing Season, except for the ending. He explains to Shooter how his allegation is invalid, as his version of the story has been published in a mystery magazine 2 years ago, but Shooter demands proof and warns him against informing the police. Shooter kills Mort's dog, Chico, that very night, and leaves a note with the corpse giving him 3 days to produce his evidence. Failing to retrieve the evidence from his and Amy's residence, Mort hires a shamus to investigate more about Shooter from the locals. Shooter comes around again and demands Mort to change his story ending to his version where the wife gets assassinated by the protagonist. Shooter's threat becomes a trauma for Mort, and when Amy's house gets destroyed by an arson fire, he panics and seeks help from the police to bail him out of his trepidation. Based on Stephen King's short novel Secret Window the movie is an American psychological thriller revolving around Mort Rainey, played by film star Johnny Depp. With Johnny Depp and John Turturro's brilliant performances, the movie serves its purpose to entertain the audience with bone-chilling thrill.
Am I not all that you thought I would be?
Number 9. Stephen King's The Night Flyer, 1997. The movie starts in an uncanny and foggy airfield where the caretaker is seen to be mysteriously killed by some unknown and bizarre being. The protagonist, Richard Dees, a skeptical tabloid reporter, refuses to take the case of an occult, massacred murder handed over to him by his editor-in-chief, Merton Morrison. The murder happened in a rural airfield and was committed by a pilot named Dwight Renfield, who believes himself to be a vampire. With the news of 2 more murders of a similar kind in a different airfield, Dee's curiosity grows and he approaches Morrison to take over the case, where he discovers it is already handed over to neophyte reporter Catherine Blair. As the movie proceeds, we see Dees and Catherine working hand in hand to hunt down the killer, presumably a blood-sucking vampire, with more mysteries waiting for them to unfold. The movie The Night Flyer, based on the 1988 short story of the same title by Stephen King, is an American horror movie starring Miguel Ferrer and Julie Entwistle, directed by Mark Pavia. Provocative as it may be, the movie is an enjoyable and thrilling time killer for the lovers of the vampire genre, as it does a good job of depicting the suspense and horrors of the old-age vampire movies. Number 10. It. 2017. The film opens in 1988 in a small fictional town, Derry, in the state of Maine, with Bill Denbrough crafting a paper sailboat for his 6-year-old brother Georgie, who eventually loses it in a storm drain along the rainy streets. Georgie, in his attempt to retrieve his boat, faintly discerns a clown-like face inside the drain, who introduces himself as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. The mysterious clown lures Georgie to come closer, and when the unblemished kid does so, he bites his arm off, dragging him into the sewer. The following summer, Bill, still being haunted by his brother's disappearance, recruits his friends to investigate the case. With the help of his new classmate, Ben Hanscom, who has been keeping a track of missing children, the group learns that they have all encountered a different version of this shape-shifting clown, in the form of their worst fears. They map out its movement along the sewer lines, which all led to the old stone well, under an abandoned house on Neilbolt Street. The team, calling themselves the Losers Club, seeks out their path to find Bill's missing brother Georgie.
Daddy. Christian?
Directed by Andy Muschietti, It Chapter 1 is an American supernatural horror movie based on Stephen King's 1986 novel and 22nd book of the same name. The takeaway for this movie is its visuals, which are horrifying indeed, and Bill Skarsgård starring as the shapeshifter. The movie bagged 3 Bogey Awards and was also stated as one of the best films of 2017 by many critics. Number 11. The Shining. The movie is about Jack Torrance, his wife Wendy, and their gifted son Danny. Jack, who is an upcoming writer and a recovering alcoholic, is also abusive to his wife and son. To overcome his writer's block, Jack decides to take over the job of a winter caretaker at the remote Overlook Hotel in the Rocky Mountains in the off-season. There, the manager Stuart Ullman informs him about the former caretaker Charles Grady, who murdered his family followed by his suicide in the hotel. Wendy and Danny also come along to stay at the hotel. Dick Halloran, the head chief, before heading out for his vacation, apprises Danny about his telepathic ability shared by the two. He called it Shining. He also warned him about the horrors of Room 237.
Out. You understand? Stay out.
Danny develops a connection with the hotel and has strange visions where Jack, on the other hand, goes through a mental breakdown, envisioning dreams about killing his own family. As the movie further unfolds, we see the horrifying sequence of events that take place. Directed by Stanley Kubrick and co-written with novelist Diane Johnson, The Shining is a 1980 psychological horror film based on Stephen King's 1977 novel of the same name, and starring Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, Scatman Crothers, and Danny Lloyd. The movie successfully brings the horrors and terrors of a haunted house to light, with supernatural visions and phantasmal deaths. Winning 4 awards and 8 nominations, The Shining is a movie worth watching for all viewers. Number 12. Christine, 1983. The plot of the movie is set in September 1978 in Rockbridge, California, where an ordinary teenager Arnold Arnie Cunningham's life changes after he buys a used and broken down red and white 1958 Plymouth Fury from George LeBay. The car was previously owned by George's late brother Roland, and since his parents won't let him keep the car at their place, he had to sell it. The car had a name too. It was called Christine. 21 years ago at the Chrysler Corporation assembly plant in Detroit where the car was assembled, a worker got his hand trapped and injured to the falling hood of the car. Another worker was found dead inside the car on the same day. Arnie repairs the car at the garage-cum-junkyard owned by Will Darnell. Arnie spends ample time with his car, and with each passing day, he develops changes in his persona. He becomes arrogant, paranoid, and dressed like a biker gang member. Arnie's worried mother, Regina, informs Arnie's only friend, Dennis, that the ex-owner of the car had committed suicide in the car. On being accosted by Dennis, George admits the truth and also tells how Roland's family died in the same way. He added how Roland tried to get rid of the car after the death of his wife, and it returned to him on its own after 3 weeks. Meanwhile, Arnie gets more and more involved with the sinister and supernatural car Christine, leading to a series of horrific deaths. Directed by John Carpenter, Christine is a supernatural horror film based on Stephen King's 1983 novel of the same name. The movie, starring Keith Gordon, John Stockwell, Alexandra Paul, Robert Prosky, and Harry Dean Stanton, is entertaining to watch and highly recommendable for audiences having a flair for the supernatural genre.
How about the light?
Number 13, The Running Man, 1987. The plot is set in 2017, where the United States has become an authoritarian police state. To divert the population's concern from the economic collapse of the country and worldwide, the government broadcasts a live game show, The Running Man, where criminals fight for their lives by dodging armed mercenaries only to earn a state pardon. In this ruthless state of affairs, a police helicopter pilot, Ben Richards, has been framed for mass murder during a food riot in Bakersfield, California, and arrested by his colleagues. He is put in a labor camp from where he escaped with 2 resistance fighters, Harold Weiss and William Laughlin, after 18 months. The resistance group under the leadership of Mick tries to hijack the ICS Broadcast Network's uplink facilities to reveal the government's deception. Meanwhile, on visiting his brother's apartment, Richards learns that it is now occupied by Amber Mendez, and his brother is sent to a re-education camp. Richard takes Mendez captive and tries to flee to Hawaii, but gets arrested at the airport. Damon Killian, host of The Running Man, meets Richards and offers a deal to free Weiss and Laughlin if he participates in his show. Richards accepts the trade, and there begins the gamble of life, death, and freedom. Starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Maria Conchita Alonso, Richard Dawson, Yaphet Kotto, and Jesse Ventura, The Running Man is a 1987 American dystopian action film based on the 1982 novel of the same name written by Stephen King. It's commendable how the storyline has been executed in the movie, with casts doing appreciably well in their departments. If not for everyone, with Arnold Schwarzenegger, it will definitely be a stunner for the action lovers, as its execution of its futuristic hustle and the intense fight sequences is worth a watch. Number 14, 1408, 2007. The movie revolves around Mike Enslin, a misanthropic author who writes books describing various supernatural events, which he, on the contrary, has no belief in. He alienated himself from his spouse Lily after the death of their daughter Katie. Challenged by an anonymous message stating "Don't enter 1408," written in the postcard with an image of the Dolphin Hotel, Mike reaches there, demanding room 1408. Gerald Olin, the hotel manager, warns Mike about the terrors of the room, informing him how in the last 95 years, not a single person has survived more than an hour in there. He also told him about the 56 latest deaths. Olin fails in his attempts to discourage a stubborn Mike, even by bribing, as Mike imperils and threatens to take legal action. Succeeding in his motion, Mike enters the room, recording in his mini cassette recorder about how nothing paranormal was visible to him when suddenly the song "We've Only Just Begun," a hit by the Carpenters, starts to play on the clock radio, marking the onset of the supernatural events that take place immediately. The movie then progresses with the struggles of Mike trying to escape from 1408, where many more events are yet to surprise him. Based on the Stephen King's 1999 short story of the same name, 1408, directed by Mikhail Hofstrom and starring John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson, is a complete showcase of the archaic horrors. The movie is more about a man dealing with and trying to overcome the loss of his daughter. Evaluating all, the cast fits just right, with admirable work by Cusack, and the execution of the story is commendable.
What do you want?
Number 15, Dreamcatcher, 2003. 4 friends, Jonesy, Beaver, Pete, and Henry, acquire telepathic abilities as children. They called it the Line, and they received it after a heroic deed of saving a boy named Douglas Duddits Cavell from bullies. At present, they are all setting off for their annual hunting trip in Maine. In the forests, Jonesy rescues an ill man named Rick McCarthy, who is lost, and takes him to a cabin along with Beaver. Suddenly, there is a commotion, and the animals start running past their cabin, followed by 2 army helicopters, declaring the area quarantined. Jonesy and Beaver go back into the cabin and find Rick sitting on the toilet, motionless and unresponsive. Rick falls dead into the tub, and a lamprey-like creature squirmed and screamed in the toilet. Beaver tries to entrap the creature under the lid, but fails, and the life form breaks out and kills him. Jonesy makes a run for the outside, but is confronted by a larger extraterrestrial life form called Mr. Gray. Meanwhile, Henry and Pete crash their car nearby to save a woman who was a part of Rick McCarthy's original hunting group. The woman soon dies and discharges a worm which Pete kills.
Drink again.
The plot is then revealed that they are against extraterrestrial beings, and the fate of the world struggling against alien invasion proceeds. Dreamcatcher is an American sci-fi horror film adapted from Stephen King's novel of the same name. The film had a decent cast, starring Thomas Jane, Jason Lee, Damian Lewis, Timothy Olyphant, Morgan Freeman, Tom Sizemore, and Donnie Wahlberg. Directed by Lawrence Kasdan, the movie is a delight for sci-fi horror lovers.
Oh, you're alive, huh?
Number 16, Dr. Sleep, 2019. This movie is a sequel to the 1980 film The Shining, where Dan Torrance, who was a kid in the previous movie, has grown up to be an adult, still traumatized from his family's tribulation at the Overlook Hotel. Years later, Danny is ushered by the ghost of Dick Halloran, aiming to captivate the ghosts of the Overlook in lockboxes. To subdue his shining, he engulfs himself in alcoholism, which he reverses after moving to a New Hampshire town. Gaining his new identity as Dr. Sleep by comforting dying patients with his shining, he starts working in an infirmary. Steam, a psychic essence acquired by the gruesome sufferings and deaths of the Shining holders, is fed by the True Knot, a cult of psychics led by Rose the Hat, to expand their lifespans. Abra Stone, another Shining holder, alerts Dan of them, as the True Knots hunt for Steam, killing a boy in the process. Progressing through the storyline, Dan and Abra fight back their common enemy, where more trauma and challenges await them.
See the crow. Where's the crow?
Oh, Abra.
Dr. Sleep is a 2019 American supernatural horror film based on the 2013 novel of the same name by Stephen King, which is a sequel to King's 1977 novel The Shining. Directed by Mike Flanagan, Ewan McGregor playing the lead role of Danny Torrance is the perfect fit for the role. With nostalgic memories from most of our childhoods, the movie brings back the tale of The Shining, with an intense flavor of a modern thriller. Number 17, The Dark Half, 1993. The movie revolves around an intelligent and well-read author, Thad Beaumont, who is better known for his top-selling murder mystery thrillers which he wrote under his nom de plume of George Stark. After a point, he wishes to do away with the pen name Stark and buries him symbolically in a mock grave. Mysteriously, Stark becomes a real-life person, coming out of the grave and strikes terror in the lives of Beaumont and his family members. He kills the native photographer Homer Gamache and leaves in his truck. He also assassinates Thad's editors-cum-agent and his ex-wife, followed by a man named Fred Clausen, who is trying to blackmail Thad for using his pen name. The police suspect Thad for the death of Gamache, as he tries his best to convince Sheriff Alan Pangborn of Castle Rock, Maine about his innocence. Later, Clausen's corpse was found by the police, which was brutally castrated and his throat slit with a message written on the wall, "The sparrows are flying again." Thad, sitting in his cabin, ponders he might have a psychic connection with Stark. He then starts receiving messages from Stark and worries about who is going to be his new victim. Directed by George A. Romero, The Dark Half is an American horror film adapted from Stephen King's 1989 novel of the same name. The movie might have a resemblance with the Jekyll and Hyde story, but the atmosphere of thrill and suspense is remarkably well preserved throughout its run. Number 18, Pet Sematary, 1989. Lewis Creed, after joining the University of Maine as a physician, shifts from Chicago to a small town of Ludlow, Maine with his wife, Rachel, kids Ellie and Gage, and Ellie's pet cat, Church. Rachel and Ellie survey the woods and come across the funeral cortege of children carrying a dead dog to a cemetery called Pet Sematary. Meanwhile, Lewis encounters a mortally injured jogger named Victor Pascal. He has been struck by a running truck, and just before giving up on life, he calls Lewis by name and cautions him about Pet Sematary. The incident leaves Lewis perplexed, and that night he dreams about Victor's ghost leading him to the Pet Sematary and warns him not to cross the barrier. The dream wasn't a mere ordinary one, as Lewis wakes up the next morning with his feet covered in dirt. One day, Ellie's pet cat Church gets run over at the highway during the family's absence. Their congenial neighbor, Judd Crandall, suggests Lewis to bury Church in an ancient burial ground beyond the pet cemetery, and also to keep it a secret. The next day, a resurrected Church returns to the family, but is now grown ferocious.
Christ.
After a few days, Gage gets killed by a large heavy motor vehicle on the same highway, leaving the Creed family devastated at the loss. Judd believes that the maleficent forces around the ritual ground have awakened and are a cause for Gage's incident. Judd meets Lewis and narrates the story of Bill Batterman, who had buried his son in the burial ground, only to return as a zombie, terrifying the locals and warning him against doing the same with Gage. Despite all caution, after Gage's funeral when the family leaves for Chicago, Lewis stays back and exhumes Greg's body to rebury at the ritual site and wait for what is to happen next. Based on Stephen King's 1983 novel of the same name, Pet Sematary is a supernatural horror film directed by Mary Lambert. The film did more than decent at the box office, and the overall production of the film has been done meticulously, especially with smooth transitioning from the bright and ambient setting to a dark and gloomy one.
Out of time?
Number 19, The Mangler, 1995. The movie is about Bill Gartley's laundry press named The Mangler, running at Gartley's Blue Ribbon Laundry Service. Due to a mishap, Gartley's niece Sherry gets a cut from the machine's lever and spills blood on its tread while trying to dodge an old box being carried by careless movers. The icebox and the blood coming in contact with the Mangler causes sparks and light streams in the machine. In due course, an elderly worker, Mrs. Frawley, spills antacids on the Mangler's moving tread. In her attempt to retrieve the pills, the safety shield mysteriously lifts and ensnares her hand, followed by her entirely. The machine completely crushes Mrs. Frawley. Police officer John Hunton, along with his brother-in-law, demonologist Mark, investigates the paranormal case. Mark persuades Hunton to believe that the machine is possessed and needs to be exorcised to expel whatever evil spirit resides in it. As the story moves forward, Mark and Hunton learn how Gartley, along with the village heads, performed dark and evil rituals on the machine to acquire wealth and power, and Gartley would be soon doing the same again. The Mangler, released in 1995, is a horror movie about a possessed press reader. Based on Stephen King's 1972 short story of the same name, the movie does not twitch from delivering the Stephen King vibe. Starring Robert Englund and Toby Hooper, the movie does make a fair collection at the box office. Number 20, The Green Mile, 1999. Paul Edgecombe, an aged retired officer living in Louisiana, becomes emotional after watching the film Top Hat. Showing concern about her partner's growing sentiments, Elaine implores Paul to reason with his emotions, explaining which, Paul recalls the events that took place years back in the death row called the Green Mile. Back in 1935, Paul meets John Coffey, a prisoner accused of raping and murdering 2 innocent little girls, brought to the prison to face his death sentence. John joins 2 other prisoners on the same block, Edward Dell Delacroix and Arlen Bitterbuck. Dell was a victim of regular torture by the bestialism of Percy, the nephew of the state governor's wife, which crossed the line of sanity as he kills Dell's little pet mouse, Mr. Jingles. Healing the almost dead mouse back to life, John discloses to everyone about his supernatural healing abilities. As John heals Paul's severe bladder infection, Paul realizes the good in the former and doubts the fact of John being a murderer and a rapist. Directed by Frank Darabont and based on Stephen King's 1996 novel of the same name, The Green Mile is an outstanding representation of both human cruelty and nobility, exposing to us the realities of life. A fine film as it is, The Green Mile is a must-watch, not to forget the brilliant acting by Tom Hanks. Number 21, Cat's Eye, 1985. The plot of this movie consists of 3 short stories, Quitters Inc., The Ledge, and General, revolving around a tabby cat who frequently sees an image of a discarnated young girl asking for help. The movie begins with the tabby cat hiding from a dog in a delivery truck, which takes him to New York and is soon picked up by a man named Junk, who is an assistant to the clinic counselor Vinnie Donati of the rehabilitation organization named Quitter Inc. The clinic's persuasive measures to quit smoking were uniquely terrifying. The cat escapes from the clinic when a brawl takes place between Donati, Junk, and their new client Dick Morrison, and travels to Atlantic City, New Jersey, where a crime boss and casino owner, Kressner, adopts him. Here begins the second story, The Ledge, where Kressner and a former tennis pro and gambler, Johnny Norris, fight over Kressner's wife. The tabby cat witnesses the incident, playing his crucial part in deciding the fate of the duo, and hops into a goods train traveling to Wilmington, North Carolina, which is the setting for the last plot. The tomcat at Wilmington meets the girl whose disembodied images have been haunting him, and her name was Amanda. Amanda adopts the cat and names him General. The movie and anthology Cat's Eye, directed by Lewis Teague, is a horror thriller film with the first 2 stories based on Stephen King's 1978 short film collection called Night Shift. The cinematography, cast, and visuals adds up to a good and entertaining film to watch.
I want to hear about it.
Hear about what?
The stories. Everything.
Number 22, Apt Pupil, 1998. The movie takes place in Southern California in the year 1984, where we see the character of Todd Bowden, who is a 16-year-old high school student. Arthur Denker, an aged neighbor, is threatened and blackmailed by Todd as he discovers Arthur's real identity to be Kurt Dusander, a former Sturmbannführer in the SS who is now a fugitive war criminal hiding from justice. By various means, Todd coerces Arthur, aka Kurt, convincing him to tell Todd the reality of wars. In return, he promised to safeguard Arthur's secret from the police, but surprisingly, when Arthur starts telling him about his experiences on the battlefield, Todd's relationships with others like friends, family, and his girlfriend deteriorate. Based on the 1982 novella of the same name by Stephen King, Apt Pupil is a psychological thriller film directed by Bryan Singer. It is a movie of allegory and transfiguration. Being the king of suspense and tension building that he is, Stephen amazes us with his work yet again, where the actors did a commendable job in their portrayal of the characters. Number 23, Firestarter, 1984. The story is about 2 young college students, Andy McGee and Vicki Tomlinson, who participated in a human experiment. Along with other participants, they were given doses of a low-grade hallucinogen called Lot 6. The drug had terrible side effects for the rest, but it gave the duo special abilities. Vicki could read minds, and Andy could control others with his mind. Andy and Vicki get married and give birth to a daughter named Charlene, Charlie, who could manipulate fire with her thoughts and could also see the near future. One day, after returning home from work, Andy finds Vicki murdered and their daughter Charlie abducted by the same government agency that had sponsored the experiment. All this while, the couple were persistently stalked by the government's Department of Science Intelligence Wing, also known as the Shop, and they wanted to weaponize their daughter's pyrokinetic abilities. Andy soon finds and rescues Charlie and sets out on a run hiding from the government. Firestarter, directed by Mark L. Lester, is a science fiction movie based on Stephen King's novel of the same name. The pace of the movie is well maintained with a fair amount of suspense and thrill. Lester did justice to Stephen King's sci-fi elements, and overall the movie is entertaining to watch. Number 24, CUJO, 1983. The story revolves around a mild and friendly Saint Bernard named CUJO. The film opens with CUJO chasing a rabbit to a cave, only to get bitten by a rabid bat in the nose. CUJO belonged to the Camber family, and when the Trenton family arrives to meet abusive mechanic Joe Camber for some repairs, he gets along well with them. The Trenton family includes Vic, housewife Donna, and their sensitive young boy Tad. Off late, Vic and Donna's marriage was going through turbulence after Vic learned about his wife's adultery with Steve Kemp, her ex-boyfriend from high school. CUJO's infection starts showing its early signs where he gets annoyed by loud noises and starts showing his rage with soft growls.
CUJO, it's me, Brett. Take it easy, boy.
CUJO's responsive infection, left unnoticed by the Cambers, soon grows out of hand when one morning he gets mad and kills their alcoholic neighbor Gary Pervier. On finding Gary dead, Joe tries to call the authorities, but also gets killed by CUJO. Vic, struggling to keep his advertising agency afloat, goes out of town for work, when Donna, along with Tad, visits the Cambers' rural home to mend their car and gets attacked by the infected and vicious CUJO. Donna tries to drive away to safety. The car's alternator breaks down, and they get trapped with CUJO attacking them in the unbearable heat in the locked car. CUJO is a horror film about a dog getting rabies and losing its sanity. Directed by Lewis Teague, the movie is adapted from Stephen King's 1981 novel of the same name. The film did a commendable job putting up a dog to perform in finesse and earning a cult following after its release in 1983. Number 25, Cell, 2016. The movie starts at a Boston International Airport, where we see our protagonist, Clay Riddle, about to board a flight back to his family. Clay is a downcasted artist who is eager enough to be reunited with his wife Sharon and son Johnny, as he ditched them earlier to prove his worth by fulfilling his dream of publishing a graphic novel. With his cell phone out of charge, he calls Sharon using a payphone, when all of a sudden an electronic signal called the Pulse is broadcasted worldwide, which unanticipatedly turns all the cell phone users into belligerent lunatic killers. Somehow escaping the mayhem in the terminal, Clay groups up with some survivors in a subway car, where he meets Tom McCourt, the train's conductor. Clay and Tom decide to abandon the train and are accompanied by another man as they try to escape. Soon, the third man gets viciously butchered by an infected human near the tunnel's exit. Clay, worried and anxious, gets desperate to meet his son Johnny. The story, as it progresses, gets violent and explicit as Tom and Clay regroup with Alice Maxwell, a teenage neighbor of Clay's who killed her infected mother in self-defense, tries to make it to Clay's family. American science fiction horror film based on the 2006 novel of the same name by Stephen King, sell as a complete package bringing out the thrills and horrors of a pandemic outbreak, a different kind, where humans become bloodthirsty and start killing each other. Directed by Todd Williams, produced by John Cusack, starring John himself, along with Samuel L. Jackson, the film shows the story of a father trying to reach his son, fighting his way through the dangers. For the lovers of the thrill and spontaneous tension, it's a movie definitely worth a watch. Number 26, Silver Bullet, 1985. The movie opens up in the spring of 1976 in the small rural town of Tarker's Mills, Maine. The film's narrator, Jane Coslaw, faces a transition in her relationship with her crippled younger brother Marty after a series of murders. Railroad worker Arnie Westrom, pregnant Stella Randolph, and Marty's best friend, Brady Kincaid, all were victims who were murdered brutally by an unknown, unseen being, believed to be a werewolf, causing terror and stress in the entire town. Following all these incidents, a group of citizens form a vigilante unit, backed by Brady's father, to hunt down the horrifying killer in the woods. 3 of them get slaughtered in the process. A party hosted by the Coslaws introduces the character of Red, who gives Marty a custom-made wheelchair, which he calls the Silver Bullet. As the movie progresses, a series of efforts are made to capture and eliminate their town's threat. Silver Bullet is a 1985 American horror film adaptation of the 1983 Stephen King short novel, Cycle of the Werewolf. Director Dan Attias did a commendable job, as it is now considered a cult classic. With the power of suspense and the ruthlessness of werewolves, Silver Bullet is definitely worth a watch for all fiction lovers. Number 27, The Lawnmower Man, 1992. The movie brings us the story of Dr. Lawrence Angelo, who works for Virtual Space Industries, and Job Smith, an intellectually disabled man. Dr. Lawrence has been researching and experimenting with his theories as he uses psychoactive drugs and virtual reality to enhance cognitive performance. His test subjects were chimpanzees, but the experiment went haywire, as along with increased intelligence, the chimpanzees got highly aggressive and escaped. Looking for a new test subject, his eyes caught Job Smith. Job is a mentally challenged person who has a grown-up body but the mind of a child. Luring and promising Job with increased intelligence, making him smarter, Dr. Lawrence recruits him. Angelo redesigns the intelligence-boosting treatments to remove the aggression factors used in the chimpanzee experiments. Job's intelligence is enhanced, and he develops psychokinesis and telepathy. He continues training at the lab until an accident forces Angelo to abort the experiment. But on the other hand, Job develops evil in him and starts killing everyone who mistreated his former self. Starring Jeff Fahey as Job Smith, an intellectually disabled gardener, and Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Lawrence Larry Angelo, The Lawnmower Man is a 1992 science fiction horror film directed by Brett Leonard. The movie is based on a 1975 short story by Stephen King called The Cyber God. With a touch of terror and thrill, the movie is a well-formulated package for the lovers of the horror and sci-fi genre. With the cast doing a brilliant job in bringing out their characters, the movie is worth a watch.
Sorely test you, for he has great power, even greater than that of the Blue Man.
Number 28, Children of the Corn, 1984. The movie opens in the year 1980 in the fictional town of Gatlin, Nebraska, which is an agricultural hub surrounded by vast cornfields. The town is religious, as the church has a high hold on decision-making. Isaac, a 12-year-old boy, gathers all the kids in town in the cornfield and brainwashes and implores them into joining a cult whose religious beliefs are based on a bloodthirsty deity called He Who Walks Behind the Rose. Soon, the children of the corn town start attacking adults in town, brutally murdering them, and finally sacrificing them to their religious practices. Meanwhile, we see Bert Stanton and Vicky Baxter, two lovers and adults, traveling through Nebraska, exploring all the rural areas on their way to Seattle. As they cross the town of Gatlin, they accidentally knock down a boy named Joseph, who was fleeing from the town of horrors. Observing Joseph's slit throat, which happened before the impact, the duo explore the abandoned town for help. In due course, the other kids, led by Isaac, come in contact with these two new adults and aim to capture them and use them as their new sacrificial offerings for their bizarre demonic ritual. The movie Children of the Corn is a horror psycho-thriller based on Stephen King's 1977 short story of the same name. Directed by Fritz Kirsch, starring Peter Horton, Linda Hamilton, John Franklin, Courtney Gaines, Robbie Kiger, Anne-Marie McEvoy, Julie Maddalena, and R.G. Armstrong, the movie has done a commendable job in bringing out the evils of cult practices, and needless to say, the thrill and blood rush while watching it is worth praising. Number 29, Sleepwalkers, 1992. The movie begins with Sheriff Jenkins investigating the case of a missing young girl at Bodega Bay, California. After searching a creepy house with dead cats, they find the missing girl's corpse in a cupboard. It is soon revealed that Charles Brady and his mother Mary were responsible for the young girl's death. Both mother and son were shape-shifting, energy-draining vampires who wandered around in search of virgin woman's life force, and their only weakness was cats. After fleeing from California, the mother-son duo, also referred to as the Sleepwalkers, settled in a small Indiana town. Charles joins a high school with fake certificates and tries all possible ways to chance upon a young student, Tanya Robertson, only to drain her life force for himself and his starving mother.
As lunch!
Their teacher, Mr. Fallow, learns about Charles's fraud and decides to confront him about his certificates, leading to a catastrophe of horrifying events. Sleepwalkers, written by Stephen King and directed by Mick Garris, is an American horror film. It was the first time Stephen King ever wrote for a movie specifically. The movie was nicely paced and unfolded gradually, maintaining the atmosphere of suspense and thrill throughout. Number 30, Maximum Overdrive, 1986. The movie is about how inanimate, non-living objects come to life as Earth crosses the trail of a comet, mostly machines of all kinds. ATMs, bridges, vehicles, and several other machines bring chaos in the world as they become aggressive towards humans, attacking them all over the world. Duncan Keller, an employee at the Dixie Boy truck stop, gets blinded by diesel sprayed by a revolting gas dispenser. From an arcade machine electrocuting a customer to an electric knife injuring waitress Wanda June, this sudden outbreak of rebelling machines has created an air of terror and chaos all over, leaving everyone perplexed. The movie continues to determine the fate of the world where machines are at war with humans. Based on King's short story Trucks, the movie Maximum Overdrive is a sci-fi movie directed by Stephen King himself. A unique idea as it is, the movie's concept amazes the viewers, leaving behind a thought of how we humans are dependent on machines in our daily lives. The movie, with its abstract idea of horror, is a treat for all sci-fi lovers. Number 31, 1922. 2017, the movie revolves around the story of Wilfred "Wilf" James, a farmer, his wife Arlette, and their 14-year-old son Henry, an isolated family living in Hemingford, Nebraska in the year 1922. Offended by his wife's plans to sell the farm and then move to Omaha, Wilf is determined to murder her. Arlette does not support her son's relationship with his girlfriend Shannon. Using which as a reason, Wilf manipulates his son to help him kill Arlette. As the movie unfolds further, Wilf and Henry deceive her, agreeing to sell the house, murder Arlette in cold blood, and then dump her corpse in their farm well. Believing they have succeeded in their plans, they start living happily in peace, when, shattering their short span of joy, Arlette's ghost comes back to haunt them and make them suffer. Directed by Zach Hilditch, 1922 is an American horror drama film which is based on Stephen King's 2010 novella of the same name. Stephen King, as we know, is proclaimed for his ability to write stories with the air of unsettling suspense, and constant tension gets the right justification by the movie. With the depiction of the cruelty of mankind and the eeriness of a vengeful soul, the movie 1922 is absolutely worth watching. Number 32, Graveyard Shift, 1990. The story starts with Jason Reed, a worker working in the graveyard shift at a rat-infested textile mill that has recently been reopened. While he is working, Reed gets surrounded by rats and throws a rat into a cotton picker to scare the rest away, but he fails as the rats are stubborn enough and they don't leave. Annoyed by their nuisance, Reed gets ready to throw another one into the cotton picker, when suddenly he's taken by surprise as a humongous unseen creature pushes him into the cotton picker, ripping him apart. Warwick, the foreman of the mill, is a very stubborn, sadistic, and perverted bestial person, and is in need of people willing to work in the mill on the graveyard shift. John Hall, a widow drifter, gets hired by Warwick. Warwick repudiated the closure of the rat-infested mill and hired Tucker Cleveland, a rat exterminator, to deal with the rat problem. But Warwick gets disappointed as Tucker fails in his task and suggests shutting the mill down as he is taken aback by the intelligence of the rats. In the following weeks, Hall is bullied by his fellow workers Danson, Brogan, and Stevenson, and Warwick, who holds a special hatred for him. Warwick is informed that the basement must be cleaned up to make way for new offices. Warwick assigns Stevenson to look through the basement before he assigns a crew to clean it out. But in the process, Stevenson gets killed by the unknown creature of the darkness. As the movie unfolds, we see the rest of the survivors trying to escape. Directed by Ralph S. Singleton, written by John Esposito, starring David Andrews, Stephen Macht, Kelly Wolfe, and Brad Dourif, Graveyard Shift is a horror film based on the 1970 short story of the same name by Stephen King. For the lovers of thrill, suspense, and horror, the movie is a treat. Indeed, the work by the cast is commendable. Number 33, The Dark Tower, 2017. The movie is about an 11-year-old boy, Jake Chambers, living in New York City, who envisions a huge tower called the Dark Tower. In his frequent visions, he sees a mysterious man, a sorcerer called the Man in Black, who intends to demolish the tower, leading to the destruction of the universe. He also sees a man with a gun called the Gunslinger, who on the contrary wants to stop the Man in Black from annihilating the tower. Believing and witnessing a few sudden resemblances from his visions in the real world, Jake follows up to an abandoned house where he discovers a futuristic portal that leads to a post-apocalyptic world called the Midworld. After entering the portal, Jake ends up in the Midworld, where he comes across Roland Deschain, the gunslinger from his visions. Roland then discloses to Jake about the powers and evilness of the Man in Black, and that at any cost, they have to save both of the worlds by stopping the warlock from destroying the tower. Further progressing into the movie, we see Jake and Roland's journey with the desperation of preventing the Man in Black from executing his plans on the tower's demolition. Directed and co-written by Nikolai Arcel, The Dark Tower is a science fantasy western action film based on Stephen King's novel series of the same name. The movie is a treat to the sci-fi lovers, and the action sequences are no less of a stunner. The cast's Idris Elba as Roland Deschain have done a highly praiseworthy work to bring out the best version of the character. This movie is worth the watch.
Thank God for those pills. For those little blue pills that made Gerald so...
Number 34, Gerald's Game, 2017. The movie opens with Sam Cooke's song Bring It On Home to Me, where married couple Jesse and Gerald leave for a stay at an isolated lake house in Fairhope, Alabama to rekindle their marriage. On arriving at their destination, Jesse feeds a stray dog outside the slit house and leaves the door open while entering it. Gerald takes his Viagra, and Jesse changes into her sexy outfit, placing the tag on the shelf above the bed. Gerald gets a pair of handcuffs and wishes to enact a stranger rape fantasy with Jesse. Without much enthusiasm, she agrees to Gerald's proposition, but later feels uncomfortable. The couple's sexual moment soon changes its course to a heated argument when Jesse stops their roleplay, followed by Gerald having a cardiac arrest and dropping dead on the floor. Handcuffed to the bed with her dead husband lying on the floor and no one to attend her screams, Jesse struggles for her survival in the course of the movie. Based on Stephen King's 1992 novel of the same name, Gerald's Game is a psychological horror thriller. Directed and edited by Mike Flanagan, the movie had its world premiere at the reputed BFI South Bank on September 19, 2017. With Bruce Greenwood and Carla Gugino with their phenomenal performance as Gerald and Jesse, the movie is a symphony of thrill and horror. Gerald's Game is a great adaptation of Stephen King's story and is a must-watch for all. Number 35. In the Tall Grass, 2019. Cal DeMuth, along with his pregnant sister Becky, arrives in San Diego, where they hear the young lad named Tobin's voice from a tall grass field nearby calling for help. They both enter the field only to get separated from each other. Confused and terrified, they try to leave the grass field, but fail to find the road. Cal encounters a bruised Tobin holding a dead crow, and Becky meets Tobin's father, Ross. Tobin buries the bird in their path, claiming that the grass won't move dead things, and warns Cal about the message he received from the rock, which said that Becky is soon going to die.
She's gonna die soon.
Meanwhile, Becky's spouse Travis reaches the destination, in search of his gestating wife and brother-in-law, as they have been missing for 2 months. Tobin arrives at a nearby church with his parents Natalie and Ross, whereas Travis enters the field to investigate. On hearing Travis scream for help, their dog, Freddy, followed by the family, runs into the field again. They all reunite in the grass field and chance upon their fate to escape the paranormal tall grass field.
I think we have to get moving.
Yeah, you know, I agree. Let's just go.
Wait, in which direction?
I don't know!
Directed by Vincenzo Natali, the movie is based on Stephen King and Joe Hill's short novel of the same name. The movie is a spooky one and does not outgrow into a terrifying one. The movie holds a strong atmosphere of fear and suspense with a decent cast: Tiffany Helm, Leslie de Oliveira, Will Bew, Harrison Gilbertson, Avery Whitted, Rachel Wilson, and Mike Trax is a must-watch for horror movie buffs.
That's pretty good!
Number 36. Dolan's Cadillac, 2009. The story begins with Tom Robinson, a middle school history teacher who shares an amicable, passionate, and romantic marriage with his wife Elizabeth. One day, in the middle of her horse riding trip, Elizabeth encounters a sour deal of human traffickers, where gangster Jimmy Dolan shoots and kills 2 Latin American human smugglers and an illegal immigrant. She soon gets exposed to the thugs who start shooting at her. She manages to escape from the spot, but drops her phone, which comes into Dolan's possession later, helping him to find Elizabeth's residence. Soon after the incident, Elizabeth finds a cadaver with lips sewn shut left at her residence, which was a symbolic threat to keep her mouth shut about the recent assassinations. The Robinsons seek help from the authorities, but Elizabeth gets killed by explosives in her car, which got triggered by the car's ignition. The incident happens in front of Tom's eyes, and he loses his peace to become a hardened road warrior, seeking revenge from gangster Jimmy Dolan. Based on Stephen King's short novel of the same name, Dolan's Cadillac is a Canadian crime thriller. Compared to King's twisted concepts of horror, the movie is a rather straightforward one. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.